Hey everyone, it's Mike, and welcome to Chip Damage. And that's it. 2023 is over. I'm filming this in the last few days of the year. I hope everyone's having happy holidays out there. I hope everyone an early happy new year. But yeah, another year has come and gone. And I'm not the first to say this. It's been said by many outlets and publications. 2023 was a wild year for gaming. The current generation finally feels like it's starting to pick up some steam with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, as well as great titles releasing for the older Switch, still kicking 6 years into its lifespan. Some great PC titles. 2023 is going to go down, most likely, in most gamers' minds, as one of the greatest years of gaming maybe ever. I mean, the last time that was said was probably 2017. Which I can make a whole video about, but 2023 is one of those years like 1998 or 2001 where you can really say like there was a deluge of titles. And I don't know about you guys, but it was impossible for me to keep up with a number of those releases. A lot of these were big games. A lot of these were long time consuming or addicting games. But needless to say, regardless of what area of gaming that you enjoy, you more than likely had more than one title to hold you over this year. So with that said, I would love to go through what I played through 2023 and what my game of the year, if you will, kind of was for this fantastic year. And, you know, I am a game collector, but I'm also someone who likes to play their collection. So I was wondering how to do this video. Should I only focus on the games that came out newly this year, or should I just talk about the games that I played in general? So what I decided to do was just kind of incorporate everything broadly. I'm not going to go over every single title I played, but what took up the majority of my year. Some of it was titles that I finally got around to playing in 2023, working through the eternally growing backlog, and some of them were brand new titles, which there was like kind of a smorgasbord to kind of go through. So yeah, let's jump into it. And before I begin, I just got to say, I would love to hear your comments about what you guys were playing, what your game of the year is. I'll go over this at the end, but that is my favorite part of this channel, is just hearing recommendations and new ways to play games and new games to check out. So if you like this video and you want to hear more content like this, please do that YouTube stuff, like and subscribe, and let's jump in, shall we? So yeah, about a year ago, this month in late December, a title came out that I was very much looking forward to, and that is the title that I kind of began 2023 with, and that is the re-release, the remastering of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, a remake of one of the greatest PSP games, one of the greatest Final Fantasy spin-offs, and in my opinion, one of the greatest Final Fantasy games, period, for a lot of reasons. I believe this came out mid to late December last year. I picked it up, very excited to go through, and you know, I do love collecting my achievements and trophies. I'm like, I'm gonna platinum Crisis Core. Already gone through it 3 times on the PSP, just out of sheer like love of it, and I 100%ed that version. But like in a video I made earlier this year, I kind of fell out of it pretty quickly. Not because I don't love this game, I really do love this game, but to 100% it is a pretty large effort. But there's one thing that, like, and this has never happened to me in a game, there's one thing that kept me from playing this, is the new voice acting, and I'm not the first one to say this. I love the original English voiceover in the PSP version. I believe the actor who played Zack in particular was Rick Gomez, and there's a vocal part of the Final Fantasy VII fandom that is very upset with the recasting of Zack's voice. The entire cast, for the most part, has been recasted. The entire voice, all the characters have been revoiced. And most of them are very similar and very good. Characters like Sephiroth, Aerith, Tifa, they all sound great, Cloud. But there's really a problem with Zack. Zack's VA kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And the fact that last year at this time, I was also playing a ton of games, and that this is a lengthy game, and the fact that I'm not really a fan of that voiceover kind of made it so I didn't finish this, unfortunately. I still have to go back. I'm still going to force myself to kind of get back into it, but I'll probably play it with the Japanese voiceover, because for the first time ever, you know, I play a lot of Japanese games, guys. I play a lot of games with like poor dub or silly dub, but this game is so near and dear to my heart. Like, it actually perturbed me enough to delay playing this more, the voice acting in this game for the main character. But on a gameplay aspect, this was pretty good. This was not a full price game. I believe this was 40 or 50 US dollars. And that's about right. Crisis Core was originally a handheld title, And this version of the game is not a full like remake or anything like that. It's basically just got a new new coat of HD paint, and it looked good. I played through the first 2 chapters. Everything seems to be in place. There's some kind of quality of life improvements there. But yeah, if you've never played this before, definitely check it out. Maybe you won't notice how bad Zach's voice actor is, but I must say more people should play this game. It was trapped on the PSP for like 15 years, so I'm glad that it's more widely available on a multitude of systems and PC to play now finally, even if I don't agree with the voiceover choices. But that's kind of how I ring the year in. However, mid-January, early January, I decided to finally jump into one of the biggest games that I've yet to kind of fully go through, like from beginning to end. A game that I had begun and hadn't finished so many times, despite loving it. I just never had the time to really get into it, and that is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Yes, I love what I've played of Xenoblade. This is a franchise that I have more watched than played. I had a very good friend that was obsessed with these games, all dating back to Xenogears and especially Xenosaga, and had shown me large chunks of the Wii version of this, but I had never myself played from beginning to end. And I think I started like 2 or 3 times and got sidetracked by side missions. But with this new Switch release coming out 3 years ago and a little bit of a gray area for me to kind of fill, a little bit of a void in releases in early January, I decided to give this version, the completed, updated version, a shot. And my God, what a coat of paint this was. Unlike with Crisis Core, they kept all the original actors in this as far as I know, but just gave it an absolutely gorgeous coat of paint. This is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. And this is on the Switch. This really shows like what art design can do. And also on a technical level, because this game is nearly open world. Like it is massive in the amount of missions and things to do and enemies roaming around. But by the time I was done with this game, like I did a good number of side quests. I made sure not to burn out. I had the time to play. I must say, this is one of the greatest RPGs and games I have ever played. Watching and playing are not the same thing. When you have hands on it, like gameplay is the largest kind of determining factor of a game. And yes, while many people kind of decry the MMO-like combat of Xenoblade, I didn't mind it. Like, yes, it is not my preferred combat system, but it's pretty fun. It's real-time enough and strategic enough for me to kind of sink my teeth into and really enjoy. The enemies, the boss battles, the party members, I loved it all. One of the most original stories I've ever played in a JRPG, and that's saying something. I've always loved the JRPG trope of like your first mission is save Kitty and the last like the last boss is like kill God. Like like that's like how small it starts to how big it ends. And while Xenoblade does follow that, it tells an interesting, heartfelt story with a great cast, great VA, just sights to behold. And, you know, I really miss JRPGs like this that didn't really try to aim for realism or kind of ape another style. Or like it's kind of its own thing. You know, there have been grand epics in RPGs, especially JRPGs before, but you couldn't really call Xenoblade what's happening. And it's very succinct. It never loses its verisimilitude. Like it's like you can follow and it just goes wild places. And the whole time I loved it. This version came with the DLC or the, if you want to call it the expansion pack, Future Connected, which was pretty good. That was like a 20-hour or 15-hour DLC package with a whole smattering of side missions. That was decent, but the main game itself, if you've never played Xenoblade and you're wondering what all the hype about is, to be honest, I wish more that the larger RPG franchises would make stuff like this. Like, you know, this isn't like anything else. I'm not a huge fan of some of the other Nintendo RPGs, especially, not to decry legendary franchise, but I'm not a huge Fire Emblem fan because like the world isn't very interesting to me. The design of it, the look of it, the lore of it, it's not really my thing despite trying multiple titles. But Xenoblade is just such a wonderful game, and it was a great year, great way for me to start my 2023. Which brings me to the next title that I picked up, the first brand new title for 2023 I'll be talking about. This is an oddball. In early March, we got Cereza and the Lost Demon, Bayonetta Origins. Yeah, so this game kind of came out of nowhere. You know, after Bayonetta 2 launched late last year, they announced pretty quickly that it was getting this spin-off title where you played as young Bayonetta and her cat Cheshire, in like kind of a puzzle. I wouldn't quite call it a platformer, like a more of just like a puzzle adventure game. And this was bizarre. Number one, that another Bayonetta game, a full-priced Bayonetta game, was coming out so quickly after the launch of 3. And that could be exciting. Though I had many issues with Bayonetta 3, it was still a pretty good game. However, this was an odd thing because I don't think anyone who's a Bayonetta fan cares about the story of Bayonetta. If you've played Bayonetta from the beginning, you know that what it is, it's a passion project from former Capcom Clover employees at Platinum, collaboration between Platinum, Sega, and Nintendo to just be a pastiche of action games, like just gameplay and style over story, taking elements from, Okami and Devil May Cry, obviously, and Resident Evil, and name dropping things, and like things from Sonic, like the rings, and just like throwbacks to like legendary series. So like to try to build a substantial lore was just like an odd thing. I'm not super interested in it. And when I played this, I couldn't finish it, unfortunately. I think it's a beautiful game. It's got good music. It's definitely going to be on like some Switch Hidden Gems list, but it kind of just came and went because I don't exactly know who this is for. While it's good on its own, it wasn't something I was really in the mood for. And that's an important thing when you're working through a backlog or playing a game. You really got to be in the mood for a game when you play as many as I do. Like choosing what to play, it really boils it down. Like I can't make a set schedule for myself. I've tried this, like, okay, I'm gonna play this trilogy in order, then I'm gonna play this. It never works because if I'm not into it, I'm not gonna have a good time. I'm gonna drag my feet. And that's what I started to do with this game. Yet again, if you're a huge Bayonetta fan, it's worth checking out. I don't know if I would pay the full price for it. It has some fun to be in the puzzles. But yet again, I kept asking myself, like, who is this for? This felt so different than mainstream Bayonetta, like this wild abandon that the franchise normally has. And yes, it's cute and it's beautiful and it's cool to know more about Bayonetta, but I'm like, but why do I need to know more about Bayonetta's character when all I ever really cared about is what's the next weapon I'm going to get and what's the next big boss I'm going to fight? So this game is a weird little side game that probably should have been like $20, and it's sad to know that Hideki Kamiya will never work on another Bayonetta again after leaving Platinum, but it's worth checking out. It was a cute little game that I spent a few hours on earlier in the year, and I do recommend checking out for only the biggest Bayonetta fans. But one of the first games, brand new games for 2023 that I 100%ed, that I needed to get everything in, and I don't have it physically. I downloaded it digitally because I was kind of bullied into. I'll just use this game's cover as a kind of stand-in. Is Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm. Yes, I will use the Final Fantasy 1 through 6 collection just to kind of have something in my hands as I talk about it. Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm, Final Curtain Call, if you don't know, or Final Bar Line, I'm sorry, is the third in the series of rhythm games that Final Fantasy has made over a number of years. Before being only on the Nintendo 3DS, it is now upgraded to consoles. And what it is essentially is a rhythm game where you get to play through some of the major songs through the entire Final Fantasy series, as well as a huge number of other Square Properties musical catalog, including Xenogears, Dragon Quest, Nier, Mana, Saga, like all these great games. If I believe correctly, it like launched with like 400 songs, and it comes to like 500 songs after all the DLC. Yes, there is DLC, and like pre-ordering the game digitally gave me more songs, which I hate because I like getting my games physically. I'll probably still buy a physical copy later, but I wanted those songs, so I got it digitally. And man, it was wonderful. I love me some rhythm games, and I love Final Fantasy, so it's kind of a match made in heaven. But if you're ever curious, like, Square is very hit or miss. Like every other game is either like trash or amazing. Like it could be, I guess if you want to call it a Square game, like it could be Marvel's Avengers, or it could be like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like every other game, like our Strangers in Paradise or Left Alive, but then, you get like Final Fantasy 15, 16, like, you never know with Square, especially with the spin-off titles, or if they'll do some weird practices like Chocobo's Dungeon, or Chocobo's Racing rather. But they did right with Theater Rhythm, where there is a good amount of DLC, but it's not insurmountable to get everything price-wise, but it launched with a huge amount of content. It works like an RPG where you choose a cast of characters from the multitude of characters throughout Final Fantasy history, and they level up as you do songs. The better you do, the more you level up, the further you go. And you'll be playing like fantastic songs like, One Wind Angel, of course, comes to mind, and Terra's theme from Final Fantasy VI, or like Blinded by the Light or Arclight Step from Final Fantasy 13. I put like 60 hours into this game. I wanted everything. I wanted to level my characters up to 109 stars, wanted to get that platinum. Every couple months they dropped some new DLC, and I would hop in and play that. It was very addicting. My eyes would turn red playing that game because some of it is nail-bitingly hard. And I was, of course, a little worried considering that the 3DS versions of the game used the touchpad heavily. Substantially, a large part of the gameplay was using the stylus. And I was wondering how that would kind of translate to consoles, and playing the PS5 version, it translated extremely well. It's very customizable too, how quick button inputs are and how quick the notes come. That's all very kind of manageable, and they gave you a lot of options, and the presentation is great. And like I said, yeah, there's like probably, I think 56, I forget how much, could be up to $100 worth of DLC on the game total. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but just buying the base game gives you hundreds of songs to play through, and I strongly suggest it. That was my first really amazing experience, and 2023 did not let me down at all. But with that said, March also had another fantastic release, which must be talked about. It made multiple Game of the Year list, and that is the remake of Resident Evil 4. Yes, one of my favorite games, one of like everyone's favorite games of all time. No one's ever played Resident Evil 4, the original, and gone, it's mid. No, that's never happened. If you've done that, you don't exist. Before that came out, earlier in the month, early March, I decided to go through RE4 one more time. I think I've gone through this like 7 times, 8 times in its entirety, just to like get it fresh in my mind. And I wanted to really compare how this compared to this, because even though I'd played this so many times, it'd been a few years, I decided to go through it, get everything, get the PRL like laser cannon, get all the suits. And yeah, by the way, Resident Evil 4 holds up like amazingly. Like playing it, any way you could play this game is good. I played the VR version of a friend's on the Oculus. Fantastic. So of course I was excited for Resident Evil 4. Of course I was a little apprehensive. I mean, like, how do you kind of improve on perfection? Resident Evil 2 and 3 the remakes are fundamentally very different than the original Resident Evil 2 and 3. And the Resident Evil 1 remake, it's like the remake's just better, right? I mean, the first one's campier and has a charm, but the Resident Evil GameCube remake that's been ported has kind of replaced the original, while 2 and 3 kind of sit alongside the 2 and 3 of the original versions, because the newer versions are more over the shoulder. They have different layouts. They have just a different tone. And I know some people weren't really happy with Resident Evil 3 Remake. I enjoyed it. I know it was somewhat of a shallow experience, but I don't know. I just kind of had a lot of fun. I went through the game like 4 times. But when they announced Resident Evil 4, a lot of people were like, okay, you probably should have did Code Veronica or maybe even Zero. Those games really need a remake. While Resident Evil 0 is a beautiful game, it needs some quality of life upgrades. Yes, there is an HD version that added some stuff, but like a full-on remake could have kind of brought that game up in line with its other numbered siblings. And same with Code Veronica. While it doesn't have a number, it's actually more important to the story than probably even Resident Evil 3 is in a lot of ways. And that game's also very clunky when you go back and play it, and could use like a serious upgrade. But jumping right to 4, I see why. I mean, this would generate the most hype because everyone has played this. I think you can play it on a watch at this point. But yet again, like, it's already over the shoulder. So they're just going to pretty up the graphics. And essentially, the answer is yes. This is a bizarre remake in the sense that really not much has changed. Only a little quality of life improvements have been made. Weapon switching was much easier. Some things have been shuffled around. Obviously, the visuals were fantastic. This game looked great. Some bosses were shuffled around into different areas. Some character designs and boss designs are entirely different. Like Louise looks totally different in this. The U3 boss was kind of relegated to another part of the game. Like some things were just kind of shifted, and it was great. It was a long, lengthy adventure. They added some side mission content. Not everything was there at launch. The Mercenaries mode was kind of released a few weeks after his free DLC, if I'm not mistaken, and then Separate Ways came a little bit later and added more stuff to the Mercenaries mode. And at the end of the day, I thought this was great. It was a good 25, 30 hour like adventure as the old one was, with some more content added in. There were some changes I didn't exactly love. I thought like what they did with like kind of Krauser was weird, and you know, minor other things. But overall, it was really good. Does it replace this one? No. Is it better? I don't know. It didn't leave as much of an impact as the original. How could it? Resident Evil 4 is so, genre defining. And while like there was nothing really wrong with this, it didn't hit. Maybe because it was so similar. It lost a little bit of that anime character. You know what I mean? Like you still do some flips, still do some backflips and some crazy stuff, but some of the goofiness of Resident Evil 4 kind of went away, and there was some content straight up removed. Like yes, we got separate ways. But we didn't get an assignment Ada, like that quick little like hour campaign that the original version had. Okay, the PRL Plaga cannon gone. Very upset about that. Don't know why I thought that was going to come back with the assignment Ada DLC. Not there. That was like the ultimate weapon in the old one. These are minor things, of course. Overall, it was an excellent game. One of the best games of the year, no doubt about it. I don't think it'll be as remembered as the original. Kind of like how I think Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2 Remake are both so different. They'll both be remembered for very different reasons. People, when they talk about Resident Evil 4, they're always going to be talking about the original one. I think, that's my opinion. But I still think this is an A-class game that everyone should check out. Whether you've played the original or not, play this remake. It's fantastic. Have no doubts. It plays wonderfully. It looks good. It's Resident Evil at its core. What can I say? And it was one of the best games I played this year. But we must move on. After I was done with that, after I was done with Resident Evil 4, I was still in a Capcom mood, guys. I was like, why don't I play the game that was originally, at least its predecessors, originally going to be Resident Evil 4? So I finally made some time to play Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. Yes, now, as you all know, Devil May Cry 5, or Devil May Cry is one of my favorite series of all time. I've talked at length about it. It is one of the most revered gaming franchises ever. It redefined third-person action games. Every third-person action game essentially borrows from Devil May Cry, from your Ninja Gaidens and your God of Wars. Like there's always going to be, like if you ever play a game where you're a powerful character jumping very high, killing a lot of enemies, and if you're not Dynasty Warriors, if you're not aping that, you're aping Devil May Cry. And I love all those franchises. And Devil May Cry 5 was, the comeback for Devil May Cry in a lot of ways. After being dormant, the main franchise, for so long, the mixed reception of DMC Devil May Cry, the reboot, it's a good game, but it was not Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry 5 coming out in 2019 was astonishing. I loved it. It was one of my favorite games that year. I did have some issues with it, but more on a technical level. Playing it on console, the loading times were incredibly long, and there were a lot of them. Just going in and out of the menu and the shop and all that, it was very clunky, very disjointed. And there were, some problems I had with the stage design. Like some of the city designs and hotels and things like that were awesome, but when you're in the Clyde tree, it gets a little dull looking, but that's neither here nor there. Like that's very aesthetic. Playing as V was never my favorite. I never really got into playing as V, but I decided, hey, look, this special edition came out when the new consoles launched. It has all the DLC. Some things have been upgraded. Let's give it a shot on my PlayStation 5. And my God, what an upgrade. This was firmly needed on the console end. Number of visual updates to this, being able to play like at 120 frames per second and all that was great. But just in general, immediate loading. Like just by that, it made me go through this game 100%. Yes. And one of the most difficult platinum hunts I have ever done, if not the hardest. There's only a few things that really rival it. I decided to platinum Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. It took 100 hours, but I was addicted to this game. I even ended up liking V. I learned all the nuances, of which there were many, for all the characters. Nero, Dante, V, the DLC of Virgil in this game, and the Bloody Palace, all included. Fantastic, responsive controls, great bosses. This ended up like making Devil May Cry 5 way higher in my list of favorite games ever. While the original version was good, it probably should have originally only came out on this console, on the next generation. The RE engine looks great. Man, what a game. This was a good way to spend my April playing this game. See, again, another game that came out a few years ago that I finally got the time to play and really respect all the additions, one of the best games you could still get on this console. Check it out, Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. And speaking of slightly older games that finally got their final updates this year that I put a hell of a lot of time into, especially when I had friends come over, Streets of Rage 4. Everyone knows that this is one of the best beat-em-ups to come out in years. Looks great, plays great. It's a miracle. Sega licenses it out to another .emu, Guard Crush, Lizard Cube, a number of developers, and they did an amazing job. And the game, when it first came out, was good, but I kind of held off on playing it a lot, and I'm glad I did. They added a huge expansion with the Mr. X collection and multiple kind of balance and patching content updates. And so after all that, I decided to really dive into it, unlock a bunch of stuff, and my God, so addicting. Talk about like the perfect party game with friends or couch co-op. I would only play this with friends, couch co-op. I would not play it online with them. I'm like, you guys, if we're gonna play as a team, we gotta play together. That's the way you play beat 'em ups. And there was no contestant to that. Everyone just wanted to come and play. Like, what do you guys want to do tonight? There's nothing to do. Streets of Rage? Yeah, Streets of Rage. Let's go. We played for hours. This game is so addicting. There's so much to unlock. The Mr. X like gauntlet modes are so good. This is truly one of the best beat 'em ups. There's been a lot of good beat 'em ups lately, like the TMNT, Shredder's Revenge, and what have you, and Scott Pilgrim getting re-released. But I must say, out of all those, I gotta give it to Streets of Rage. After a couple years of content, it's finally complete. At least I think it is. Who knows what they're gonna do next? But I believe they had the final patch upgrade earlier this year. Definitely suggest playing this. Perfect co-op game, retro, new gamer. It doesn't matter. This game's awesome. Streets of Rage. But most of these have been smaller titles or games that have come out prior years. The game that I was most looking forward to in 2023, and that's saying something considering how many big titles came out this year, was a game I made multiple videos on, and I can't stop talking about, and that is Street Fighter 6. A lot was riding on this game, guys. You know, growing up playing fighting games, especially Capcom fighting games, like loving Marvel vs. Capcom and this multitude of Street Fighters, rival schools, what have you. You know, Street Fighter 5 was pretty much a massive disappointment for the entire last generation. And while that game ended up being great, it took 2 or 3 years to really get going. I don't think, and I've said this many times, the stank of Street Fighter 5's launch ever really left people's like taste buds or what have you, left their noses, because you know, it got great, but you had to wait so long. And at the end of the day, Street Fighter 5 ended up having a great roster of characters and things to do, but it was basically a beta with no characters or things to do and bad online when it first launched. And it never felt right. It felt kind of patchwork by the end of it. The fighting system was okay. The V system was never quite as fun as like Street Fighter 3 or 4's like parry or FADC or focus system. So we were really looking forward but worried with what we were seeing with Street Fighter 6, the community in general. I mean, it was looking good, but you never know till you get the game in your hands. So when June 2nd rolled around and I popped this in after only playing a little bit of the demo, I didn't really want to spoil it. They had open betas. I just wanted to kind of hold off and see. Man, it was like a revelation. Without a hyperbole, this is probably the best fighting game, the most fun I've had with a fighting game in a decade, since the release of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 or Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I could not put this down for the month of June and most of July. I mean, I don't play a ton of online gaming anymore, but I do like to get some fighting game matches in every now and then. I do like playing fighting games online, and I put over 2,000 matches in this, like online, which I haven't done since I was in college, a long time ago, guys. What to say? This game plays fantastically. Like, let's start there. The gameplay of this is fantastic. So what they decided to do is take the most, if not all, of the systems from all the prior Street Fighters and just cram them into this. Do you like alpha counters from the alpha games? They're in here. Do you like parries and perfect parries from Street Fighter 3? They're in here. Do you like focus attacks and dash cancels from Street Fighter 4? They're in here. Do you like a multitude of installs that are comparable to the V system from Street Fighter 5? Also in here. All like crammed together very seamlessly and very accessible, whether you're a brand new player, a mid-level player like myself, competitive player. Everyone seems to really love this game. Like, you could have 2 people playing Ryu, but Ryu will be different to each of those people. There are multiple paths, to go down instead of kind of the set in path that you had to play in Street Fighter V, or at least that's the way it's playing. Like there are all those mechanics, but you never need to use them. They just add a layer on what's a very good feeling fighting system. And that's great because you have tons of modes to play this system in. There is a huge story mode, the World Tour mode, which, you know, at first glance seems like kind of cheap and tacked on. It's basically you create a character and you go around the Street Fighter world of like Metro City and other towns, you know, checking out what Shadowloo is doing and all this stuff. But like, as a Capcom fan, there are so many references and things to unlock and things to do. It's not short. It's really cool. That's also how you just unlock everyone's secondary costume in this game. Like you can just unlock content for the main game in that. And I think that was pretty neat. I put a lot of time into it. Is it super deep? No, but it's something to do when you're cooling down from playing with your friends or playing online. It's just good as a Capcom fan. It's something to do. There's a full arcade ladder, which I don't take for granted anymore after Street Fighter V, with tons of mini games like, you know, parrying basketballs and blowing up the truck and what have you, things that should have been there in Street Fighter V, but they brought that and more back in Street Fighter V. Hundreds of pieces of unlockable art. I know that doesn't sound like much to some, but I've always loved unlockable stuff in fighting games, like a gallery. There's like 500 images in Street Fighter V, both old and new, just stuff to get, what, like with minuscule challenges like beat arcade mode or do this many supers or do this many like critical finishes, what have you. And I think that's really good. Like I said, more stuff to do. There's multiple modes, like wacky modes, extreme battles where, like, you know, a bull will roll across the stream or bombs will rain down on you. There's also, amazingly, a rotating selection of classic Capcom games that you can purchase via the battle passes for like $5, but they're free with in Street Fighter 6. They just rotate 3 at a time. And I'm talking like real classics here, like Final Fight, Street Fighter Alpha 2, Mega Man the Power Battles, Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, you know, a multitude of shooters. Like, I believe in total it's 15 just classic games for you to play. You can just go play those in Street Fighter 6. So it's kind of like a hidden collection in this game in a certain sense. Like, why did they do that? I don't know, just to get goodwill from us, but it worked. And most importantly, fantastic netcode, playing with friends across America and in other countries. The online in this game, out of the 2,000 matches I've had, I would say 2, 3, maybe 4 of them have been laggy, which is incredible. This is a game that requires a high speed, like, kind of input, like no delay. And like right off the bat, it was really good. And yet again, I just wanted to level up and rank up in ranked mode, do some player matches. And as you did this, you unlocked other things in the game for whether it be your playable avatar, which you can go online with. You can just create some overpowered freak and fight some other ones overpowered freak in this game. Like, there was just, like, it was overwhelming the amount of content at launch. Now, there were some problems with it. The roster is too small at launch. It had 18 characters, and I don't think that's enough at launch. I think that it was more than Street Fighter V 16, which was unacceptable, but this is the biggest fighting game franchise, or the granddaddy of them all. It should have more than 18. Street Fighter 4 Vanilla launched with 25, and I don't buy the argument that was in arcades for a year before it came out. You bought a full-priced game with 25 characters back then, and you know, that is comparable today. When you buy a full price game, you should have at least that minimum going forward. And I understand there's more content in this, but this is not a mid-tier fighting game. This is not like Blaze Blue or Melty Blood. This is Street Fighter. You have a huge cast of characters to bring back. I think 25 would have been perfect, or even like 22, which was the original leak, but we found out that 4 of those characters were DLC. But I digress. At least those 18 characters are all pretty fantastic. The original Street Fighter 2 cast, along with a bunch of newcomers that are pretty great, like Marissa, Manon, Kimberly. Luke sucks, but, like, you know, you got some good characters like JP and what have you as the new villain. The DLC started out pretty good. There seemed to be like a new character every other month. But now it's slowed down, and the costumes took way too long to come out for such a successful fighting game. And it is very successful. I am a little upset with how slow the content drip has been. Most of the content is like avatar stuff, which I don't care about anymore. I feel like most people don't care about. They just want characters and costumes. But we'll see how the next year rolls out. That is the one complaint I have, is like they gotta speed that up a little bit. We're 6 months in now. We've only had 2 new characters, and we just got the new set of costumes. But what matters in Street Fighter? The fighting. And the fighting and the content, it's there. It's fantastic. I put so much time into this. This game I played the most this year. This is the game I put the most time into this year. Which leads me to my next June release. Another highly anticipated game came out in June for the PS5, and that is, of course, the from the granddaddy, or at least the biggest JRPG franchise out there. That is Final Fantasy 16. Yeah, guys, I'm sorry to say, I've seen comments about, like, what do I think about Final Fantasy 16? I'm not ready to say because I didn't finish this, guys. There's a multitude of reasons for that. Number one, and this is paramount for me to say, I was still playing Street Fighter 6 when this game came out. And I wanted to be in that zeitgeist, that ethos of all my friends are playing. Every night when I come home from work, they're playing. I want to be with them before they fall off. It was a very hype, like I was just addicted to it. So to kind of slow down and go to Final Fantasy, I wasn't in the mood for it, all I could say. And to be honest, every Final Fantasy has a different aesthetic, whether it's, medieval, cyberpunk, more anime and more Western, what have you. Every time you launch a new Final Fantasy, you never know what you're really going to get. This aesthetic is more like Western medieval adult fantasy, Game of Thrones. And that's not really my vibe. I don't care for that vibe. I like the more cyberpunk, more Japanese style, more original Final Fantasy. Most people say that start with 7, but there was elements of that with 6 with Magitech. But like that era, from 7 to 10, I love that aesthetic because they're original for the most part. 9 is a throwback, sure, but it still ends up like with this weird cosmic energy at the end of it. And I'm sure Final Fantasy 16 gets there at some point, but like I have played the first 10 hours of this game, and while gorgeous, the world and characters didn't hook me just yet. I didn't say it was bad, so don't flip out, but like it is what I expect it to be. Like I feel if this came out a few years ago, it would have hit a little harder, like with general audiences, because while this game did sell well, it didn't set the world on fire. And I don't think that has anything to do with being a PS5 exclusive. I think it came out at a time when a ton of other good games were coming out, like 2 months after Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Street Fighter, and what have you. But like, this doesn't really distinguish itself. Like, Final Fantasy 15 had a lot of flaws, but it was unique. You're basically a 4-man band going through like this kind of original world in your car, fighting monsters and all that stuff. It was very discernibly Final Fantasy. While like if you change the title of this game, it'd be hard to know that it was a Final Fantasy game if it wasn't for the summons like Shiva and Bahamut and all that. Not to say it's bad, and I want to hold my tongue a little bit more, but I will say that the aesthetic and the combat, while decent, haven't hooked me just yet, and I intend to finish this game. I'm glad I waited because the DLC just came out, at least part 1 of the DLC, and if there's one thing I can say about this game was announced about 3 years before it came out. That's not too bad, and it launched, and from my understanding and from what I played, it was not a buggy launch, and my main problem with Final Fantasy 15 is that you needed all the tertiary content in order to kind of understand the story. Like, if you didn't watch Final Fantasy 15 Kingsglaive, the CG movie that launched right before Final Fantasy 15 and came with a collector's edition, you did not get that full story. I don't care what anyone says. If you played that game and liked the story without Kingsglaive, you got like 75% of that story. There was like novels, the books, the anime, the beat 'em up where you play as his dad. There was all this extra media that you really needed for the full picture. And I think that ended up harming the game in some ways, but especially with Kingsglaive, with like the end of Kingsglaive being the beginning of 15, like there's almost like an advertisement in 15 too, like a quick cutscene that says, hey, go watch Kingsglaive. 16 just came out and it was complete as is. There isn't like this wacky amount of cut content, at least as far as I can tell. Like all the DLCs that came out way too late on Final Fantasy 15 to matter to fill in the gaps, that's not really a thing for 16. So I respect that aspect of it, that this was just a solid title, but the aesthetic and the combat and the lack of a party system isn't gripping me just yet. I don't like European stuff. However, this is a numbered Final Fantasy, and it is quality made. I can tell that right off the bat. So I will continue to play this in 2024. I will finish this game, and I will have my full review on it sometime throughout this year, at least my full discussion on it, because I want to. This is a weird game. Remember when Final Fantasy used to be like the cornerstone of a gaming generation? Like Final Fantasy X set a standard for the 6th generation. 7 was a turning point in the 5th generation, what have you. And I feel like all people when people talk about Final Fantasy 14, like, you know, it's like this huge thing, but that's an entirely different fandom than the single player games. This game just kind of feels like a holdover while waiting between the Final Fantasy VII Remake parts. But I will continue to play and have more thoughts on it later. Final Fantasy 16, good, but I didn't finish it. So throughout the majority of the summer, I continued to play Street Fighter, but I knew that upcoming, my boy Sonic was getting a new game with Sonic Superstars. But before that, I wanted to play the game that released late last year, right around the time of Pokemon and Bayonetta. But I didn't have the time to play, and I only heard mixed things about, and that is Sonic Frontiers. Yes, much like some of the other titles released last year, this game received a number of free updates, huge free updates, increasing its quality. When this first launched, I heard it was good, but buggy and this and that, and I just didn't know. I didn't know, as a huge Sonic fan, whether it's 2D or 3D, what to think of this. Sonic is all over the place with most of his releases. I end up liking most of them, but and like this looked decent, but the vibe seemed kind of odd from the trailers I saw. But I heard the game had been upgraded greatly, and most importantly, I heard the physics became adjustable, which is not something you like ever see in platformers. Like, you could adjust the weight of Sonic and the turn speed and all that, so you could really customize it. And that very much intrigued me. So I decided to start it earlier this year, end of the summer, and man, you know what? I ended up loving it. Sure, it has problems. It's not my favorite Sonic game of all time, but just it was right. You know what I'm saying? Like, the vibe was right. You know, there was something about it where, yeah, there was a lot of pop-in. People complained. It didn't really affect me, but like, they got the one thing right. It was fun to run around as Sonic. Super important. Does the sensation of running and jumping please you? Is it enjoyable? That is, I don't care if it's a 2D or 3D platformer. If it is fun to run and jump, you've done 80% of the work. And though it took some tweaking, especially like the jump's not perfect, the adjustments that you can make in the options these days certainly helped. But the actual speed, the momentum, that was all added in and adjustable. Really good. Took some playing with those settings. Are pretty minute. There's a lot of little critiques you can do. But they kind of did it, guys. Like, the running around the islands, pretty good. You could tell the game was not 100% complete, whether it was impacted by COVID or budget or what have you. But what was there was pretty darn cool. You know, it was odd. Like, what are these enemies you're fighting? Like these digital robots and what have you. They looked more like Evangelions. And I heard there was some designer from that, and it makes sense. But like, it ended up being really good. The soundtrack was really good and atmospheric. Running around the islands gave me the same sensation as like running around the Mystic Ruins when I was 10 years old on Dreamcast. You know, and the story was okay. Like, it was a more serious tone, which sometimes it doesn't work, right? Like, Sonic 06 doesn't work, but Sonic Adventure kind of did. And it was definitely the adventure sense. The new character of Sage, Eggman's digital daughter, what have you, was pretty cool. Like, I like a new character in Sonic, and I don't say that often. So I ended up like platinuming this game, which was very tedious. Like I said, there was some bugginess to this. Like, this game is not super refined, but in that there was like still fun. Like, oh, there's unlockable music tracks from classic Sonic games. There's fun bosses. There's fun mini games and activities. And while the final DLC that added extra playable characters originally didn't play great, and I didn't put much time into that, I've heard it's been upgraded greatly afterwards. Like, Sega kind of paid attention and upgraded this firmly throughout the year, and I ended up really enjoying this. And I hate saying this because it said so much, but like, this was the right step in the direction for Sonic. But I would say this is a good game on its own. I hope they follow this template, just kind of tighten it up at release and kind of give it more time to cook, because Sonic is harder to make than other platformers because of the size of the levels need to be able to kind of contain Sonic's movement speed. But great game, really enjoyed it, put a lot of time into it. Sonic Frontiers, finally got into it in 2023. In the lead up, the brand new 2D Sonic, or 2.5D, Sonic Superstars. What can I say about this? It's good, right? Like, I love me some 2D Sonic. I was, of course, disappointed we weren't getting Sonic Mania 2. This is not a sprite-based game, so it doesn't look as good as Sonic Mania 2 would have. However, it looks all right. It took a minute for it to grow on me, but the 2.5D style was pretty darn appealing after a while. My one complaint is it probably shouldn't have been a $60 game. What are you going to do? It just doesn't have that budget, a feel. But what is there is cool. Playing as Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails felt right. Some people were complaining that like Knuckles didn't feel right. He does. I've played those games enough to know what Knuckles feels like. Some of the stages were good. The music was not amazing, but not like grating. There was some effort put into it. Playing as Amy was a ton of fun. The new character Trip was fantastic. The only thing that is true that a lot of publications are saying is the bosses suck in this game. That is like one of the biggest caveats. It's like they truly blow. I I don't know why, like what happened. I think it was to accommodate the fact that you can have 4 players in this. First of all, another thing, I would never play this multiplayer. I played 2 seconds of this with 2 people, like me and one other player. The camera's all over the place. It's way too fast. Like that probably shouldn't have been what they focused on during the marketing. They should have just like marketed this as a, single player game. Playing this with 4 players would probably give me a seizure. So yeah, that's 2 blows against it. The bosses stink. They suck. They straight up suck. And the multiplayer ain't great, but like the actual running and jumping, some of the level design, the music, some of the power-ups and what have you, pretty good. Is it going to be one of the most memorable Sonics? Absolutely not. People, like, if I had to pick a like 2D Sonic to play right now, it's going to be Sonic Mania. But this was solid. I liked a lot of things about it. It's just like, I feel like it's a holdover to the next project. But yeah, it was a good year for Sonic. Sonic Frontiers got a lot of patches, ended up being a good 3D Sonic. A great 3D Sonic even, and Sonic Superstars was a pretty good 2D Sonic. I have this is not Sonic 4, it's better than that, it's better than the 2D sections in Sonic Forces, yeah, Sonic Superstars, check it out. I would say if this was a $30 game, MSRP, it would have been reviewed much better. It makes more sense. So if you can get it for 30 or under, check it out, Sonic Superstars, good game. Platinum did, difficult Platinum, let me say, a lot of collectibles. So, as the year started to end, another fighter from another legendary franchise came out that I picked up. It was a gift from a friend, actually, and that is Mortal Kombat 1. So yeah, my thoughts are very mixed on the more modern Mortal Kombats ever since Mortal Kombat 9, which is a good game, but Mortal Kombat 10 and 11, pretty good, but 11 in particular, and I've said this before, I hate the way they play. Like, I don't think they've evolved too well. Like they feel kind of clunky, and I feel like they focus more on the presentation and the extras rather than the actual playing of the game. So while I enjoyed the story mode in the prior WB MKs, like I never really stuck with them. I kind of like just kind of go through the story mode, and the DLC practices were disgusting, and a lot of them to unlock like costumes and what have you. And I'm sorry to say that like MK1 plays a bit better than MK11. I'd say it plays a good amount better with the nearly tag team, more like assist-driven cameo system. However, it's not. I just wish it didn't come out in the same year as Street Fighter 6. If this came out on its own like a good year ago, I would have probably put a hell of a lot more time into this. But after everything that Street Fighter 6 offered, this seems kind of shallow, especially for a $70 price tag. This is a $70 game. Like, it has way less modes than 11. So like while it plays a little bit better, there's just like not as much to do. And some of the DLC practices, and this remains with Street Fighter as well, are kind of like crappy and overpriced. Like it's like $12 for like 3 season fatalities. It was originally like 1 fatality or $10. Like that's absurd. Those are just cutscenes you're buying. And like Shang Tsung was like pre-order bonus DLC, and you can feel that this game is definitely not finished. Like Street Fighter 6 had fantastic cross-play right at the beginning, which is really important for someone like me because some of my friends play on PC. Mortal Kombat, despite 11 having cross-play, like this didn't. And it feels like a little more bare bones. The story mode is good. It's a reboot. And some of the cast of characters they decided to bring back are not my favorite, like Nitara, especially. There's been a lot of talk about her voice acting with actress Megan Fox, and though these things don't really matter in a fighting game, like it's still kind of noticeable. Characters like Ashura, weird one to bring back. They're going for more the 3D era kind of revival with Deadly Alliance and Deception, bringing back characters like those and Havoc and Tanya and what have you. But I don't know. The roster seemed a little funny. Like, while I'm glad some characters got really cool makeovers, like Reptile. There were some odd story decisions. It's a beautiful game. NetherRealm games are always beautiful, and I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan. But this just sent, and my understanding is this game was definitely kind of pushed forward, and you can kind of feel that. However, it's still, maybe like with Sonic, if this was like a little bit cheaper, like not $70 as a premium title, maybe if there was like a few more modes and the online was a little bit more complete, it would have been better. The gameplay would still never be my favorite compared to what Capcom is offering at the moment, but it does play better than 11. I've heard this is much more popular in the competitive scene, but I'm not a competitive player. I like to play with my friends. I like to do all the modes. I like to climb the arcade ladders. And while I can do that, there's something missing in this one. I feel like if it came out a little bit later, and not up against the stunning achievement that is Street Fighter 6, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but I would check it out if you're an MK fan. If this was like $40, it would have been much better. Some of the new designs are really cool. Some of the cameos are really cool, but it's just kind of like, you know what I mean? You can't feel this game out there in the ethos. Like Mortal Kombat 11, even though it didn't play great, like was kind of inescapable with its number of guest characters and its design and the melding of stories. This is kind of like little quieter, maybe because it's like a reboot, maybe because of the achievement that is Street Fighter 6's launch and Tekken 8 coming out in a few months. But yeah, I'm glad Mortal Kombat's still making good games. Don't get me wrong, this is a good game. I just have some qualms with it. But yeah, Mortal Kombat 1, put some time into that. Also around that time of year, maybe October, we got the re-release of my favorite video game series of all time, Metal Gear Solid, with the release of Metal Gear Solid, the Master Collection Volume 1. Now, this is something that social media and gaming media in general just kind of like shitted on. Like, I don't know what their problem really was. Like, I know that there were some bugs at this game at launch, and they were patched reasonably quick, but I didn't 100% all three of these. I just didn't have the time, and I got to be in a mood. I kind of hold these games in very high regard, so I want to be like set in and unbothered. I didn't have that time. But I did start up each of the three games and played an hour or two into them, and they were great. It's a little disjointed how the menus are, but there were a ton of extras. A ton of extras. Every version of Metal Gear, like 1 with like VR missions and European missions, the substance enhancements for Metal Gear 2 and the subsistence enhancements for Metal Gear 3, like in the NES games and the MSX games coming along with it. I thought this was a wonderful collection from what I played of it, and I just feel like people want to like yell at Konami, and I feel like there's a backlash against just like Metal Gear in general because people who didn't play it back then like don't see like how important this franchise is and like it holds up. It's weird, but like I think that Metal Gear is essentially Die Hard with anime characters, and like it's its own vibe and flavor. And I think there's a backlash against Kojima and Konami both about like their eccentricities, but I'm like, they are like, this was the movie game before the movie game was a common thing for Sony, like Last of Us or the newer God of Wars or Uncharted. But it's still like a unique story that has elements of action movies and anime with great characters and great gameplay, some unforgettable bosses throughout it all. And I feel like a lot of media, maybe that wasn't PlayStation focused earlier on, like kind of overlooks how great these stories are. Like people, oh, Last of Us has the best story, and get out of here. Metal Gear was more cinematic and way cooler and way more touching if you followed it. So I'm glad that it came back in any form. Yes, are they perfect? Absolutely not. They're not like, you'd have to play it on original hardware, but I didn't really see any huge issues playing the few hours that I did. So I don't want to become some great defender and say it's perfect, because I'm sure there are some issues. But like, what do you want? These games were locked to the PS3 for many, many years, and now they're on a multitude of consoles for anyone to play. And yes, it is kind of crappy that the Switch version doesn't have the games on the cartridge. The PS5 kind of does. So I'm good with that. I wouldn't play, it's cool that you can play them portably at all. But just the number of extras. There's like the whole script in this game and artwork and design stuff and all, like you have three of the greatest games of all time fully featured on modern hardware. You cannot bemoan that. They're patching it, whatever small issues people had. And I truly love this, and I'm glad that my favorite video game series of all time is back. If you've never played Metal Gear, you have to. Go in with an open mind, knowing it's not like anything else. There's a reason why Snake was the first guest character ever in Smash Brothers, ever announced, like third party. And Sonic came right after, because Metal Gear is important. It's fantastic, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm so glad more people get to experience it. Didn't 100% them all yet, but I intend to later this year, next year, 2024. And that brings me to the last brand new game I played this year, giving the Switch some love, and that's Super Mario Wonder. This game is great. Let me just say it right off the bat. I didn't 100% this yet, but I'm always down for a new Mario, especially a new multiplayer Mario. Now, while I'm not the biggest fan of the new Super Mario Brothers games from the Wii, the DS, and the Wii U, they were fun, but like they were kind of bland, you know? Like 3D Mario was getting real weird and real wacky at those times, like Mario Galaxy, Sunshine, Odyssey, 3D Land. Those are like out there. While like 2D Mario, 2.5D Mario was just kind of like basic, you know what I'm saying? Like the aesthetic was just like factory Mario. It was kind of lifeless, even with friends. A lot of people love those games. I don't know. I never had too much fun with them. But this game is wacky and weird, and it's multiplayer, which is a real bonus. I only play this with a friend who comes by. That is why I haven't finished it yet. But right off the bat, the uniqueness of the power flowers and all this, it controls a little better than like Mario, the new Super Mario Brothers, less slipping and slide. I feel like the wall jump feels a little better. I love the kind of painted aesthetic to a lot of this. Wonderful game. A little easy, I will say that. Like I'm not far in the game, but I've done some special stages. I do, but maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe like, this is an all ages game, but typically Mario's not the easiest in a lot of regards, like for platformers. I wish it had a little bit more challenges, especially in the boss arena, but there's a lot of variety that I've encountered so far. I'm really digging this. This game was fantastic. One of the best games I played on the Switch this year. And yeah, guys, those are the lion's share of the games that I played this year. Now, of course, there's some titles that I played smaller throughout the year that won't I don't have really time to go over. There's not much to say. Like I went through a number of Night Dive Studios shooter remakes or re-releases, like the Quake and Doom launches and Turok, which were fantastic. Little nicks and necks there. Replayed the PS5 version of Edith Finch here and there. But like, man, there was such a good set of new titles and updated titles that I played throughout this year. And I must say, like, I missed a ton. I'm not the biggest Zelda fan in the world, but I was interested in playing Tears of the Kingdom, something I'll play later on, guys. That's another big game that came out midway through the year. I'll probably play that one in like 2 years, to be honest. Baldur's Gate, not really my biggest thing, not my thing. I'm not a big thing on like kind of, create your own character, create your own adventure, Dungeons and Dragon things. It's not for me, but all the respect in the world for making a massive game, like a multiplayer game on multiple consoles that apparently the entire gaming world loves. Spider-Man 2. I love the original Spider-Man on PS4. It's like one of my top 10 games on the PS4. Didn't have time to play it. Too much other stuff coming out. I think it came out the same day as Mario Wonder, and I could play Mario Wonder with friends, and I wanted to do that. Spider-Man 1, I didn't play 100% till like a year after that came out too, because there will be DLC. The game will be patched heavily, so I kind of want to wait for that. For that game, I can wait till it's fully complete. It's going to have 3 DLCs, probably like the last one. Then I'll hop in. I'm kind of not in a superhero mode either. Like I wasn't feeling Spider-Man that much at the moment. I'm like kind of out of the Marvel phase. But it comes and goes, so I'll get to that as well. I mean, there's so many great games, that came out this year that I just didn't have the time to play. But at the end of the day, with all these great titles, what was my favorite game this year? What was the game that I'm like, that is what I remember mostly from this year, that I will associate with 2023 forever? I think it's obvious from the way I described it, that is Street Fighter 6. Now, call me crazy. I think, like I said, this is the best fighting game of the decade. Most publications won't say a fighting game is game of the year. They want some big story-driven nonsense or whatever. That's not necessarily all that gaming is. Gaming, of course, is about gameplay as well. Like, you can have a cinematic thing, but sometimes a game is just so much fun to play. It overrides any emotional story that is out there that can compete. And I think that's what Street Fighter 6 did. It had a lot to live up to, a lot to apologize for Street Fighter V, and it did. I feel like when Street Fighter V launched in an unhealthy state, despite the popularity of other fighting games, like the FGC, the fighting game community, the fighting scene was unhealthy. Yes, Mortal Kombat 11 was big, and you had great games like King of Fighters and what have you. However, like Street Fighter will always be king. It kickstarted the genre. It's like really the arcade scene in '91 with Street Fighter 2, and it revived the scene heavily in Street Fighter with Street Fighter 4. So like, I felt like the King was sick, right? And I feel like the King kind of reclaimed his throne. And if Street Fighters 6 is better, all the FGC is better. The fighting game scene is just better. You know, it pushes other fighting games to be better. You know, I feel like hyenas were nipping at the lion here. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you know, this is the new competitive fighter and all this. And especially with Capcom, their last couple fighting games were not great. Like, starting with Street Fighter Cross Tekken had huge problems. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was terrible. I don't care what anyone says, that game was awful. Street Fighter, like, could Capcom make another fantastic fighting game? And they did. And it's not just good, it's great, it's fantastic. There are flaws with its DLC and its rollout process, but what you got right out of the box was a wonderful game that is going to be played both casually and competitively for years. You can just tell the first Evo for it was fantastic. The new characters are mostly fantastic. I want to play this game right now. It's so good, and like I said, it pushed some other games away from me that I wanted to check out, like Zelda or Final Fantasy. I'm like, nah, I'm playing Street Fighter. I couldn't put it down. It made other games seem lesser in comparison, like Mortal Kombat. And I can't wait to see, like, the scene just feels very healthy. Like, Mortal Kombat 1 is great, don't get me wrong. Like, so the Mortal Kombat community is pretty healthy. Street Fighter's healthy. Tekken 8, the demo is looking great. It's a great time to be a fighting game fan. Again, King of Fighters 15 probably just finished up its DLC, so like, you know, we got a new Garo, Mark of the Wolves coming out. Feels like the King is back on his throne, and all his vassals and all the knights are doing well as well. So yeah, my game of the year for 2023 was Street Fighter 6, and I'm so happy that this turned out good. There was so much riding on this. But man, I mean, what else could I say? Mario and Final Fantasy, and you know, a new Sonic, a new Mario, a new Zelda, a new Street Fighter, a new Mortal Kombat, and a new Final Fantasy came out. What is this, 1996? Like, this is insane that pretty much all the big games from my childhood came back and had a solid out. Mortal Kombat's good, Street Fighter's great, Sonic's good, Mario's good, like Zelda is great. Like, man, insane, awesome, fantastic year. So yeah, with that, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up. That's what was my 2023. That's my game of the year for 2023. But like I said in the beginning of the video, what were yours? What did you play this year? What old games did you finally get around to playing in 2023? What brand new games did you play? Did you agree with gaming media where Baldur's Gate was the greatest thing ever? Did you disagree with a lot of those picks? What would have been your game of choice? What should people check out that they haven't? What are people sleeping on? That is my favorite part of this channel. That's what gets my blood boiling, and I want to hear from you guys. So thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel for another year. I really appreciate it. I just love talking video games, guys. I love hearing the responses. So thank you so much for that. So without further ado, thank you for watching. I'm Mike. This has been Chip Damage, and please take care of yourself.